we need to play this by the rules. That's how we play this game. We're going to play it by the rules. Okay? So let me show you the rules. All right? We're going to play this game by the rules. There's rules that we have to follow.
Today, I'd like to talk with you about fair play. This is a topic that tends to be of real interest to parents. Parents are hoping that their child is going to be someone who grows up and is well liked by others, is good at having fun with others, is able to play with others and follow the rules and be a good sport and treat others with fairness. It tends to be a value just about every parent has for their child. But parents don't always know what they can be doing, especially what they can be doing in the early years to create a foundation for that kind of development of fair play. I'd like to start off by telling you about a study. This was a study done by Dr. Martha Patellas quite a few years ago, where she was very interested in what are the kinds of things that parents do when they're playing with their children that seem to have an influence then on how children play with others. So she brought parents with the children in her study were about 6 years old into the lab, and first she observed them with parents and children playing games together. And then the children were brought together and she observed the children playing games with other children. I'm going to tell you about two sort of ends of the spectrum of how parents treated that game playing activity. So one end were parents who, during the game play with their child, were very attentive to the rules of the game. It was important for them to clarify for the child how the games were to be played, what the rules were. During the game playing, they pointed out the rules. So these were parents who really were hoping they were instilling the principles of fair play. That what would carry forward is the understanding of the rules and that rule-bound game behavior. But what actually happened when their children went in to play with other children is that they seemed to have adopted more of the way the parent interacted with them. So with these new children, they tended to be very directive. They were very clear with the other children about what the rules of the game were. They called other children on whether they were following the rules. You could see how parents had instilled a style of game playing, but in this case it was one that tended to be very off-putting to other children. Nobody wants to play with somebody who's very, very bossy and thinks that they get to say how the game should be played. And so these children actually struggled to make friends. They had some social difficulties. At the other end of the spectrum were parents in this study who didn't really care about the rules of the game. They were very focused on having a good time with their children. There was much more laughter in the game playing. There was much more enjoyment. Sometimes the kids and parents followed the rules of the game. Sometimes they made up their own rules. It was a very relaxed game playing activity. When these children were observed with other children, they also carried forward the style of interaction. They carried forward a sort of attitude of, well, let's have fun. What do you want to play? What should we play? There was more question asking. There was more attention to their peer partners, and the focus on sort of was everybody having fun. These were children who tended to be much more well-liked and quickly chosen as play partners because they were a lot of fun to be with. To give you some perspective on this, it's important to understand a little bit about how children's knowledge about fair play and games with rules and competitive games, how that progresses as children move from preschool years through into elementary school. There's a big shift that occurs between the ages of 5 and 7 in terms of children's understanding of rules and of competition. Earlier than that, in the preschool years, children are still learning how how to take the perspective of other children. Things that are outside their direct experience, like rules and guidelines, and even the way other children view things, that's hard for them to keep in mind. They're more of a sort of one focus at a time kind of brain at that level. It's often why you see them seeming very self-centered. But it's why so often in preschool you see teachers focusing on very basic playing skills, joining in, letting somebody join you in play, sharing materials, helping others, these very basic ways of getting along. And these become the critical foundation for enjoying peer interactions, enjoying interacting with friends, and later on building in this more internalized understanding and respect for rules of competitive play. So with your young child, the parents who were kind of moving too fast to restrict and orient their children to rule play were actually missing the opportunity to fuel the foundational skills, which are so important. This caring for how the other person's feeling in the game, the attention to is everyone having fun, the making sure everyone gets a say in the activity. So these would actually be the skills that you'd want to focus on with your younger child to build a foundation. And then to watch as your child's moving, especially the 5 to 7 period, into more peer interaction and more understanding of rule-based play. A good way to think about how ready your child is for understanding and moving on to rules is to provide support and choice without becoming controlling and directing.
Okay, girls, I want to tell you, this is a game with rules, and there's a challenging way you can play this game. We can play it with the rules, the way it's supposed to be played, but we don't have to play that way today. But it's something we could do together if we wanted to.
You're introducing the idea there are rules and the way they work, but you're also giving your child a little bit of room to get ready for that kind of play. Parents sometimes wonder, should they let their child win? And I think as you're moving forward, if you're at the young end of the preschool range, don't worry about it. They're not really attuned to winning and losing. They're attuned to the nature of the play. But as they start moving into that, getting ready for that transition into kindergarten, you are going to want them to understand there are rules to games. And in that case, you might think about giving them the choice. Do you want to play it once and we'll do the rules? And then we can play it by your rules and I'll let you in. That way, you're still giving them the emotional security of being able to have fun with you and know you got their back and you're supporting them, but that you're also helping them learn the challenge of rule-based game. And you can explain to them as going to school, these kids are going to want to play the games by the rules. You're easing them into that strong foundation you built for understanding how to have fun with someone, and then layering the understanding of rules and competitive play on top of that. A last couple of notes about that to parents based on that initial study is that kids will absorb so much of, they'll absorb some of the talk, they'll absorb a lot of the way you walk the walk. So your attitude and your own way of talking around winning and losing is so important in terms of how they're going to feel and how they're going to behave in the same kind of situation. So you also want to make sure you're approaching games in a way that you're modulating your own feelings about the winning and losing in the competition to be checking that they're still with you and they're having fun, as opposed to you've created a situation where you're modeling overly competitive behavior.